This is your host, Minute Lawrence, and with me, Pastor Percival, and we're coming to you live from the Ligony Club in New Kingston, Jamaica. Thank you to the listeners who have joined us online and those who are listening to us on radio, good old fashioned radio. We do our digital literacy series this morning, and we get to talk about the replacement technology. But radio is still very good business and very good entertainment too. So thank you for continuing to spend your time with us in the morning. Good morning, Pastor Percival.
Morning. How are you today?
Is that a new name for me?
Minute.
Mince. You're both shortening it and pluralizing it.
It's a minute. Good morning. It's good to be alive. And okay. Oh God is mighty. Good morning. Good morning. Morning. Wow. What a wonderful day it is. It's all bright. Everything is up.
With a hint of moisture in the air because it does
No,
look like
don't
it
tell me
just
from
had
what you hear
a
anymore.
refreshing
That's what
Rain
he said.
rain
that's
sound.
happening.
Yeah.
He actually stopped the stream to play music because
He stopped the
was
stream?
going over.
The
Yeah, stopped them on the radio.
weather
So they're
outlook
not
for
being
this weekend is that we'll have a trough over the Western Caribbean. And so we'll expect some rain later in the day. Yesterday, there was a light sprinkle
Just
when we were there.
call
So
him
we
on WhatsApp.
got that. So what he does, and
Yeah,
we
WhatsApp
got all
on
the back in our pants. Mr. Agreement that was hammered out in all units. I never know there were so many units that were represented
How did it
in what
sound?
was happening. So many units. I
It
was
sounded
thinking
muffled.
somebody said that the people sign, and guess what?
Sound
18
muffled.
is in when everything will come to the forefront. The evaluation that's needed. The steering committee would have been established to monitor the salary evaluations. What I find so unfortunate with this is that we had to have a strike in order for what was already there. So there's no way that you can do evaluation of that order
Not bounty.
Is
in
it any,
Still. Yeah, that's
The
12, in 8 days.
is
It
it any
seems.
better, Rafael?
You gotta do better than
Absolutely. You see me, I've been writing furiously all morning because that issue has occupied my mind as well, especially because
So
we,
sounding low.
we see
slow.
two questions that Popo
Mm.
include. One is the Prime Minister announcing that he is consulting with the Attorney General on the status of these workers. He's asking um, whether or not
that's right.
they are no, whether or not they are essential workers. That's the question being posed at this belated hour. Um, are they to be
See?
considered
Is
essential
it same thing,
workers?
Rafael?
Now,
Yeah.
sadly, that query is not for the purpose of ensuring that they are well protected because they are necessary to the well-being of the nation.
Is it
That
the same
question
thing?
was raised in the context of what punishment or what action can be taken against them for having withdrawn their services and putting the nation through some pain and grief. And the second question, which is on my mind, is
Sorry.
what is the action
I
that
said it's a bit better, but it's not coming over
ought to
clearly.
be taken,
So
if
he's
any?
not broadcasting.
Are you
So it
broadcasting?
has me kind of considering all of us as human beings
He's
have the right
broadcasting.
to be fairly compensated for our
See,
efforts.
look, I'm
That is
getting
one
it
of the
slow.
fundamental
Yeah, let me
It's
see
low.
it on the
and we
website.
have the right to withdraw our service if we are not satisfied with the terms under which we work. That right is actually tied up with the abolition of slavery.
True.
When you're a slave, you can't withdraw your labor not belong to you. A very important, a very important right or condition that has to be recognized always is an individual's right to stop working if they are dissatisfied with the conditions of work. So when we are thinking about essential services, we seem to consider it in the context of how do we enslave them? How do we keep them tied to the job? Because the rest of society requires their continued servitude. Instead of, how do we ensure
It
that they
sounds
are
like
well
this
taken
on
care
the
of
website.
so that
Hmm?
there
It
is
sounds like
no
this on the website.
desire to withdraw
It sounds the
services
same way on YouTube.
because they are seeking better conditions? Do you see how I flipped that?
And I'm in agreement
It
to what
sounds the
you have
same way.
shared because
It really
it's
will.
interesting
I have an audio issue.
that you raised that
It's not.
because
It's not
I
strong.
have been considering our present Prime Minister and his utterances at times. And to ask myself, if I were in his position, what would I do? Would I continue on the present trend of thought, actions that we see emerging over time in terms of how we deal with issues? It is becoming very disturbing to me in regards to that. And I remember there is the need for strength in terms of decision making, but your strength in decision making must be rooted very much in terms of your posture of heart. Am I servant to these people? Am I, or am I Lord over these people and they must be under his rule? And you have often spoken about posture of heart, posture of mind. And we ask ourselves to what end? Because at the
You have to check
end
if the camera
of
audio is on because
the
it's
day,
low.
in terms of your
Hmm?
legacy, in
If the
terms
camera
of
on?
what you
If
have
the camera
accumulated,
audio is on because
when
it's
you
hearing the
die,
external sound.
you leave it all behind. And what happens in terms of being accountable um, to Master God in terms of what you require of you. We have to be so careful. We have to be so careful in terms of what we do. Always keep in
No, just go and do your
intention
thing, man. Just go and do your thing.
that that consideration. Will
It's
my
an issue I have.
actions ultimately stand up to the scrutiny of the
I
Creator
think.
in terms of what I do every day, what I have at the end, what is my legacy? Is it that I'm operating for the audience of one, knowing indeed that God will bring me to account and just do my own thing, hoping that it will be all right?
Mm. The questions of life, let's pose them there.
Sister, we have to ask that, because I see people operating and I chuckle to
And
myself.
and you know,
Um,
was it maybe Tuesday? I made a statement about just having a concern when you see persons making certain utterances, taking certain positions. Um, I say sometimes, let me remove from them the temptation that is leading them into that path, because regardless of the discomfort that maybe they may intend or the provocation they might be stirring up, I have a genuine concern for the well-being and the welfare of a person who I see, pursuing a certain path persistently. So you speak about the Prime Minister. Yes, the Prime Minister is supposed to be chief servant. He is the leader of the leaders. And we have the expectation that his leadership, the policies he makes, just his overall presentation to the people will inspire and draw others to on a path to the prosperity that he says he desires and the prosperity which we deserve. So sometimes when we see things happening around our prime minister, I think all of us have a duty to speak clearly and to speak with kindness, because we don't want to see him be destroyed in a personal way, because he has set himself out to serve us and has fallen into one form of error or another. So there are some persons who may say we don't like the government, or we are, you know, they may label us. But I do want to make it clear, just echoing your sentiments, that you and I have a genuine desire not just to see the country do well, but to see the persons who make the sacrifice of their time and sometimes their personal ambitions to work in the public service. But it applies to all, not just those who are at the helm of our affairs, but the thousands of NWC workers who carry out the daily functions at one level or another to make life in this country comfortable to some degree. Because while you are seeing um, the cries of suffering because the, there was no water in the pipes, there are some other people who are saying we never had water anyway.
At all, that to
And
begin with.
the Prime Minister is right to say, are they essential services? An essential service worker should be essential to the majority of Jamaicans who um, are positioned to benefit from the service. But water, sadly, water delivered through a network of distribution and water of a certain quality is not a service that is enjoyed by all the Jamaicans who are
Want it.
positioned, who want it and who need it.
I will pay for it.
Yes.
There's a lot of people says, I keep getting these bills, but I've not had water in my pipe for a very, very long time. You know, like, if you want to fall of yourself in light of this God who has
Some
given
audio
us
issue.
so much for us to live and thrive in this
Audio
world.
issues.
Word of God. So that everything that we need for life and godliness, He has given it to us. And we always have to hold that in mind. We don't go off um, on many occasions on some jaunt or some inadventure, believing that there's not a point of accountability
Accountability.
that is coming to us.
I want to just go a little bit into what we want to accomplish this morning. Um, we This is Thursday, so as usual, we are continuing with our digital literacy series. We're going to be joined by with Helen
Oh, she's
on
coming back
yes,
today.
she's going to join us on phone to continue the discussion. This now is the customer education portion of the series, which JPS has very kindly taken charge of. Um, and we are going to have a conversation about the Internet of Things. Internet
So
of
like
Things
something
is
that
a
you call
technical term.
you
Oh,
different.
Martin.
I want to speak about that. I thought
Yeah,
it was your
I realize.
Oh, I
That's
can't
what
claim it.
that is what's up.
Internet of Things.
The Internet of Things. Um, this is just an important part of the metaverse. We have to understand that the digital universe is definitely here. In fact, it's not a universe, it is a metaverse. And it is multifaceted. So the ways in which the devices, appliances, things, inanimate things communicate is a thing.
That's exactly what's
So we're
up.
going to talk about it and a little bit more on security in the digital world. But new to the discussion, I want to spend a little time with you, Pastor Percival, looking at well, here what we're going to be doing with this new request.
Problem
But we are going to
This
spend
thing
a
is
little
just
time
crap.
looking at the development of labor laws,
Yeah.
the fundamental rights of workers, because we see it happening with the National Water Commission now. We are going to see, well, we had it ongoing with the police, and that's going to come up again. But we are going to see this. This is going to be a recurring issue for us to consider. Workers in the medical fraternity are going to express their own frustration and outrage. And if you want to talk about essential services, you must know that health, education, anything that touches on nutrition, your children, your safety, so security. We are going to see workers everywhere become overwhelmed and frustrated and wanting to be treated fairly at this time. And we are seeing some things. We are noticing that price increases are a constant feature of the economic landscape, which means that somebody somewhere is saying, I have to be compensated properly for my goods and my services. So we are all having to pay more for various things. But on the income side, workers are not getting more at the same pace. Yesterday, someone made a comment about the 4% increase in a context of 11% and 11% inflation rate. So, everything is going up. Let's just assume everything goes up by 11 cents and you only get 4 cents more. You're running a
So they buy
deficit.
less.
You're running a deficit every day, and in some instances, um, somebody spoke about the slice of bread for 80
$80.
dollars.
Yes, yes, restaurant.
Right. Um, so everybody is having to pay more in order to survive, but you're not able to extract more out of, um, you know, the the employers. So every sector is going to have to deal with this issue of worker frustration in a context where workers have rights. Workers have rights. The only thing that workers really lack is equal bargaining power. Because individually, I have the right to not work someplace where I'm neither wanted nor well rewarded, and I decide to stay home. There's a if my employer calls me up to say, Minute, I really need you, you gotta come back to work. It depends on how important I am to his income earning potential. That gives me the ability to set my pay or to demand what I want. Now, very few people have the power to say, I'm not coming back unless you give me X. Very, very few. Typically, there's no equality between an employer and an employee. Would you say? Yeah. So it means now that you have to, as workers, you have to become very knowledgeable about your rights and where your strength lies. And thankfully, the law recognizes your right to bargain as a unit. So it's not just one of you now, it's all the persons similarly situated as yourself who can say, listen, we're going to stop work. But you know what? It is also going to test your ability to associate under common cause and come to decisions that are sensible and meet the needs of the majority. So there are some challenges ahead which can only be overcome really by persons having the trust and confidence to work together. So I'm going to look at some labor laws, principles, and going into the Constitution as well to see what is it that's guaranteed. And when the Prime Minister and other lawmakers say, we are looking to see what we can do about these people who caused us grief over the last 2 days. What is the context in which they can make this inquiry? And what really can they do? When you consider that ultimately each person has the right to resign from any job, that this is the fundamental right that we all have. We cannot be compelled to work.
That's true.
That's the exit from slavery.
Yeah, you have a right, but even as we continue to reflect on things, it was mentioned and it was heralded and people just furlough, unemployment rate, and saying, take that in the context, as when you go, take that in the context of a lot of people stop looking for work. And then if you say an employed person is somebody who has worked for, I think it's 3 hours for the week sometimes.
Oh,
You remember that
yeah,
discussion?
yeah.
That people, I know for a fact, that
Clearly, we have to return to it.
yes, that people say it don't make no sense. And you go to work, but when you look at it, your expenses exceed what you're getting as income, and some people say there's a case in the sense that I spend all of this money to get to work, and at the end of the day, I can't even when I don't go to work and I'm trying to hustle or I do what I need to do. And those are some of the economic decisions that I believe not only here in Jamaica but even in the world people are making. Because people are saying even in places like states where they track unemployment and what they do with that, they're seeing a lot of people just deciding they not go back to work because of what has happened in COVID. So we just have to continue to look at that. But those are real issues, those are real questions that we have to contend with, and even more so, even in terms of how those who lead need to understand what is happening on the ground floor in a lot of people's lives in terms of the struggles that they face on a daily basis just to survive. And I hope we do not reach a situation where, like Mary Antoinette, who said, "Let
Let
them
them
eat
eat cake."
No,
We gotta put that in context. That is ancient history. So
I know it
you
is
have to
ancient
tell the
history,
story of
yeah.
Marie Antoinette.
Yeah, but let them eat cake because we are
The citizens were protesting for bread.
yes.
They were hungry and just wanted basic bread, not the bread of life. And Marie Antoinette, born into wealth, queen of French queen, when she heard that that there was no bread, ma'am, people are protesting because there is no bread. She said, well, let them eat cake. In her wealth and insensitivity, she felt that cake was a reasonable alternative for persons who
Wanted just
who
bread.
couldn't buy bread, couldn't find bread because there were times of great hardship
Yeah.
for the poor in France. But the palace, you see, does not suffer lack. And perhaps one of the reasons why the poor suffer is because everything is being kept in the upper classes, so nothing trickles down, no crumbs of bread or anything. She thought cake. But she's the lady who was reputed to take her bath in milk to keep her skin.
Soft. Wow.
So while the people are starving, the queen is bathing in milk and things that. You mentioned Marie Antoinette. We have to wonder: are we at that place in Jamaica where there is a complete insensitivity to the plight of the real mass of Jamaicans who are moving from day to day, making some choices which are intolerable? This issue of workers' rights and the all response is gonna bring to life some of those questions, and we have to confront them before the crisis hits us. It's time for a break. I know. Please bear with us if we're good. Okay, so we'll take our break and then we'll be right back.
Morning Connection is not your usual talk show. We aim to stimulate discussions and chart new paths to self-empowerment. So please join us, Minette and Percy, on the Morning Connection, Mondays to Thursdays, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Best 100 FM. Morning Connection is not your usual talk show. We aim to stimulate discussions and chart new paths to self-empowerment. So please join us, Minette and Percy, on the Morning Connection, Mondays to Thursdays, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Best 100 FM.
Morning and welcome back to the Morning Connection. And thank you, Miss Catherine. We are always happy on Thursday to be accommodated by JD's Urban Pub at the lovely Ligony Club, and our Ligony Club family takes care of us on Thursdays. We can never say too much about the hospitality or even about the beauty of the environment in which we are hosted on Thursday mornings. If you are longing to visit the city or even to return to Jamaica, this is an excellent place to start your visit. It is everything that you would love about Jamaica. It is well situated in the heart of the city, but in a very green, verdant. It is a garden. It's really the grounds, the entire
Oasis
grounds.
in the middle of
It is an oasis. That's the right word.
an oasis.
Well watered and
Yes, and green.
and good shade.
And in mango bush.
And I tell you, so it has all the things that make Jamaica special. You get the tropical feel. It's closely situated to other, the
Conveniences.
hotels, the banks, the business sector, if you are a business traveler. And then all the sporting facilities that are present here: tennis, squash, walking trails, swimming pool, a full service gymnasium, and the hotel rooms that are really, they started as lodgings for members who were coming into the city on business,
From
but
the country.
from the country, the planter man who was coming into the city to meet with his lawyer for 2 days. So it started as that, but has continued, and our rooms are made available to the public. And we have resident food and beverage services, JD's Urban Pub. I did not make it here for Mother's Day. I could have done with a care package. I'm still sounding a bit congested if you are listening carefully. But they had excellent Mother's Day brunch here. And they continue to titillate the palate. And later this morning, we're staying to have our Jamaican breakfast. But that aside, we can return to the weightier matters at hand. I have a concern about our treatment of workers in this country. And I want to just elevate the conversation a bit by looking at some fundamental principles and some policies, and then at another time invite the input of our listeners as we try to get a national conversation going to revise and address some of these issues from a position of law and good conscience. We say that we are covenant brothers and sisters under the Constitution such as it is. We want a better one, but right now what we have and some of the international commitments that we've made has produced a foundation for us to look at the rights of workers and the way workers are treated, especially our public sector workers, who for the most part are holding the fabric of national life together by virtue of what they do in the various departments, in the tax offices, in the public health, in the school education system, in the various ministries that handle our business. All of those individuals, some of them are very poorly paid, and even the increase in the minimum wage does not represent a great advancement for them.
One caller some time ago had mentioned the fact that one of the reasons why the minimum wage doesn't really move that significantly is that a lot of people who are in the public sector at the lower level, they are just paid a tad above what the minimum wage is. And so if you move the minimum wage significantly, it means that government as a consequence would have to move salaries in the sector. So that is why all governments have not been quick to move it, because they know what the implications would be for them in terms of their recurrent budget, which is what makes up most of the budget that we have. So outside of what we have to pay, as the Constitution says, to our debtors, then the next major component, if you look on the budget, is the recurrent portion, which is salaries and wages and allowances that are paid. And there's a very small portion of our budget that is used for capital investments, and so therefore you have a real struggle going on in terms of doing that. But as you say, and I agree with you, in terms of how do we treat with person. You know what I thought about it, and I'm thinking about Sri Lanka in terms of what happens when they defaulted on their debt that was owed to China, and it was the people rose up and said, "You guys have to resign." They had a national strike. That's what happened, you know. And I'm saying, even in terms of what we're saying with essential services, can you imagine that if all the different sectors in this country, the essential service, everybody just strike and say, "We've had enough"? Who's going to enforce what is there anyway? In terms of arresting people because they said they are
Essential workers.
yeah.
Yes. All right. In today's paper, if you look at what's the report concerning the industrial action taken by the NWC, you will see something about unlawful industrial action. It prompted me to actually just explain what the law says, what constitutes an unlawful industrial action. And when I looked at the law, I saw something that surprised me, namely that even in a private sector-led industry, take for banking, or I'm going to use banking, or maybe let's say a food distribution, let's say maybe gasoline or a food distribution business. If there is a dispute between workers and employers in an industry which is a private sector led driven industry, the minister, the government, can enter into that dispute for the purpose of achieving a resolution. So the same process that applies to an essential service that is provided by government, that process whereby the dispute can be referred to the minister and the minister can arbitrate a resolution, and if that doesn't happen, refer it to the industrial disputes tribunal. That same process can be taken in banking, in gasoline retail, in baking of bread, or whatever critical service, because the minister has the power to propose that this dispute has an impact on the national interest.
But he can just decide that.
So he can yes, he can take the decision. He can get himself properly authorized to enter into the dispute and to push the parties to follow the procedure that is laid out in the law. And if parties fail to comply with such a direction from the minister, that failure and that failure continues for more than 48 hours, they have entered the realm of unlawful industrial action. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I've heard perfectly what you have said. But this is an Alice in Wonderland.
So, and this is where I'm going with it now. We've talked about slavery, meaning an end to compulsory labor. And we have spoken with excitement on my part of an individual's right to withhold his labor if he is not satisfied with the terms of service, terms of employment, or conditions of employment. However, the absolute enforcement of that right by all and sundry could well mean that some important places that can function without you and me would have to close, or they would have to do the work themselves. For example, someone called yesterday and said that NWC managers were blaming the workers and saying that the workers on strike had hidden the valves or the tools to enable management to carry out their function. Because, when a strike occurs, those who are in the cohort of workers who withhold services, that it does not prevent the non-unionized or the non-striking workers from stepping into position, and in fact, it makes sense that every workplace have some continuity plan that includes what do I do if the mass of workers don't show up. Usually you call on managers, and most managers would have been promoted from a position below where they would have acquired the relevant experience, so they should know the basics. And we, the citizens, should also be looking at the NWC management and the minister and saying, why weren't you able to restore a certain level of service in this country when your workers are exercising their right to take industrial action in order to push for better terms of employment?
Stuff, yeah.
Yes, I mean, I'm entitled to look at you and say to you, Percy, what was your plan? What is your plan to continue services
And as somebody
at
who's
some
worked
level?
industrially,
Why would hospitals and schools and the transportation sector and so on, why should certain sectors have to close their doors or be severely impacted because the workers didn't show up? That's a question I can ask you, even as you are looking to check the law to see if the workers who didn't show up should be punished. What would your punishment be for that failure? Earlier I was saying to the producer,
punishment be to the government and
of
the
course,
managers
and the managers who should have in their box of plans a continuity plan. You know, the same zone you talked about, the special economic zone. When you apply for a special economic zone license, almost half of your effort is presenting to the authority your continuity plan and your disaster mitigation plan, because the whole structure of the zone, it's predicated on continuous business even in the face of disaster.
Okay.
So you, a private sector investor who does want to ensure that your business continue, you have to satisfy the government that you have a plan for continuity of your business. But they who administer critical services or essential services, if the workers who turn on the pipe and open the doors don't show up, the rest of us have to bathe in tea. You know, let them have cake.
Yes, let them bathe in tea, but if
If we don't have water, let's use
you
tea.
know, as somebody who's worked in industry,
Yes.
from sugar to sugar is manufacturing, as a supervisor manager, we had to know.
How to get the plant going.
Yes,
Absolutely.
and sugar when the sugar strike was a different kettle of fish.
Yes.
But some of the time it was very threatening to life and things, because when those, like if the cane cutters struck, and that happened a couple of times when I was there, they would take the vehicles, the harvesters, block the gate, and you try pass it, you see some cutlasses.
Right. So even though you could drive the harvester, you gotta get to it
Let
first.
me get to it first because I
Okay.
found that to be interesting. But you must. And for me personally, having worked there, if they decide not to work, well, we had to have a plan as supervisors as to how we were gonna keep production going in the face of the man on the street. Boiling sugar, understand how the evaporators work or the pumps itself. So that's an important thing.
So now, as the Prime Minister seeks to inform himself on the standing of these striking workers, let me tell you what the risk to them. Any worker who during the period of any unlawful industrial action which is taken in the undertaking in which he is employed ceases or abstains from or refuses to continue any work which is his duty under his contract of employment, or carries on any other course of conduct which prevents or reduces the production of goods or the provision of services in that undertaking, shall, unless he proves that he did so in any of some, circumstances, be guilty of an offense and shall be liable on summary conviction before a resident magistrate to a fine not exceeding $500, and in the case of a continuing offense to a further fine not exceeding $5,000.
So
So every person who was on strike, if if it is deemed that the strike was unlawful,
Get ready to pay $500.
somebody is looking at, and I know this is the type of thing that or the former attorney general was skilled at. She was the kind of person who would recommend that every one of them be brought before a resident magistrate so that they could plead to unlawful industrial action. So
We're talking about our Minister of Constitutional Reform.
yes, God help
Leave the
us.
lady alone. Leave the lady alone.
Now, the reason why there is a conversation about whether the industrial action was unlawful is because the NWC management is saying that they did not receive the requisite notice that such action was being contemplated in furtherance of the dispute.
Okay.
The union rep is vocal on it and says, yes, you got even more than the 72 hours notice. You've got about a month of notice
Okay.
that this action was being contemplated. And in the context of the NWC saying we were not notified and the union rep insisting that notification was done, the question has arisen as to whether it was unlawful because you are not supposed to proceed with industrial action without giving the management and then the minister the opportunity to see that the dispute is resolved.
So you're saying because there are about 5 or 6 unions that have been involved in this whole thing. You have NW, let me find it, NW.
Oh yes, bring it up.
Yeah, I'm gonna find it in terms of the unions that were involved, because there is a document that is circulating that have the signatures of all of those persons who were involved in it. So here we go. So you had this is the agreement that was signed, which means that everything will. Should I read that? Or
Yes, ma'am, go
on
ahead.
what it says?
Yes.
The parties agree the following. There will be a resumption, a consultant, resumption, there will be a consultant will be engaged with the realignment to the new public sector thing. There will be a steering committee which involves each member of the 5 unions. The Ministry of Finance will provide the recommendations to the unions by May 20th. So watch for that date, people.
So say that again, what is to happen by May 20th?
The Ministry of Finance and the Public Service shall provide the final organizational structure of the National Water Commission to the unions by the first meeting of the steering committee scheduled for Friday, May 20. That's next week, Friday. The Ministry of Finance will provide the report of the market survey that was conducted of private sector companies by May 20th, and the proposal for the compensation restructure for the National Water Commission will be concluded and finalized within 3 months from May 20th, 2022. Thereafter, the results of the said exercise shall be implemented within 3 months. So that is in 3 and 3, 6 months. So that means we're in May now. May 5 and 6, that's by November. So look for that date. And the unions that signed to it were National Workers Union, Bustamante Industrial Trade Union, Jamaican Association of Local Government Officers,
That's 3,
NWC Executive Staff Association,
4.
and Union of Public and Private Employees, UP. I've never heard of that one.
Yeah.
UPPE, yes.
So 5 unions.
5 unions. So
Okay.
that means what it is saying is that the members of the executive the workers at NWC were a part of the strike.
Okay.
So
Alright, that being so now, this is how today's reporting starts. The NWC was given more than 72 hours notice before workers of the state-run entity walked off the job, the Union of Public and Private Employees has said. The revelation came in a Gleaner interview on Wednesday, with President Fitzroy Bryan insisting that more than a month's notice was given following several rounds of virtual meetings. Bryan said too that a letter with the notice was written to the NWC's management. The disclosure contradicts a claim by President Mark Burnett, NWC President Mark Barnett, who on Tuesday told the Gleaner that he was blindsided by the industrial action taken by more than 2,000 workers.
So somebody spreading misinformation or somebody misspeaking.
But let's go a little further into the article. Prime Minister Andrew Holness has also said that he has sought a legal opinion from Attorney General Dr. Derek McCoy on whether NWC and its workers are classified as essential workers. Jamaica is still a country of law and order, and once its classification has been established or confirmed, the government will determine how it proceeds, he said at a leadership retreat in Hanover for members of the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation.
You mean the super ministry that has not produced any real economic growth from when it has come into being? Okay, all right.
And then it is incorrectly reported here that the Labor Relations and Industrial Disputes Act forbids essential service workers from taking industrial action. That is just utter nonsense. There's
These
no...
people read to
Yeah.
make sure that when I'm writing the thing,
Yeah.
if the law is there, what?
Why do you need to
Let's
say
say
something like that? Of course, it forbids unlawful industrial action, because industrial action should be taken in a particular context, in a particular way, because it's not strike for strike's sake. It is in order to achieve a resolution of issues that are important. Anyway, I wanted to just close this section.
And let us be clear here. We are
Yes.
not calling for anarchy.
Oh, not at all.
Let people be clear. But we are saying, in the midst of everything, it needs to be, there must be order in terms of what has happened and what will happen in the future. But the order must be fair to both parties. It can't be lopsided in terms of justice and so on.
Yeah, and fairness when it comes to a dispute between government and workers. Fairness has a whole different meaning, because we have seen continuously where the worker insists or presses for something, and the government just, it remains obdurate, does not yield, does not give, and I think after we see
Police
that
dispute and
we've seen it
time and time
repeatedly
again, yeah.
and so that is giving us a particular look at it. But may I just close this section by saying that the first service that is listed as an essential service in the industrial disputes in the law is water services. So this request for an opinion by the Prime Minister, I think he just needs to go and look at the Act. The
Yeah,
first service is water services.
because they will tell you what the other services are. Water services.
When we come back from the break, we'll
Yeah.
look at that some more. We're just making sure. Welcome back to the Morning Connection. Thank you for sticking with us. It's Minette and Percival at the beautiful Ligony Club this Thursday morning, going through some
You were right.
serious issues.
Yeah, but in the break, we're looking at the law as it is constituted, and it says the number one service that is listed in the labor relation and labor relation and industrial disputes, the first schedule. The number one is water services. Number two, electricity, health services, hospital. I wonder why the differentiation between
Health services and hospital.
sanitary services.
Well, you can imagine health services will capture pharmacies
Okay, hospital,
and
sanitary services,
Yeah.
firefighting services, correctional services, overseas telecommunication services.
you notice overseas telecommunication services don't even focus on. It doesn't even focus on local telecommunication services. So it don't really matter if you can talk to one another.
Yeah.
What is important is that foreigners can reach you.
Services connected with the loading and unloading of ships and with the storage and delivery of goods at or from docks where wharves and warehouses operating in connection with docks and wharves. Services connected with oil refining and with the loading, distribution, transportation or retailing of petroleum fuel for engines or motor vehicles or aircraft, civil aviation services. And I think
So what's left out?
that's what I'm just saying. So hello Jamaica,
So you notice farming not in it.
because that's not essential. Whether we eat or not, we eat cake.
Oh, it's interesting that food distribution not in it, except in so far as it affects the loading and unloading of ships or business at the docks, wharves, and warehouses. Do you notice how outward looking it is in terms of maintaining international trade and serving the interests of capital? Have you noticed?
But that is always a
Yeah.
the motivation.
Yes.
behind of it.
On the commercial side, it is very much connected to. But we did see during the days of the pandemic, the businesses that got essential service designations that had
the
nothing.
KFCs and
Yes, when you saw
the-
fast
and the-
food
and
companies getting it, you understood that it was more about who owns what and who's doing what than in terms of the utility of the goods or the product to the ordinary Jamaican.
And churches that do such an essential, and they just put
Yes,
it as
I
one
know
of
you're still hurt by that one.
not deemed essential services.
Yeah,
Yeah, because the spiritual well-being of a person, people are not important.
it was just a high watermark for me that your pet could be dying and you could get a vet come and give you care for your animals. But if your mother or your grandmother
Is
dying and
dying.
she wanted her priest or her pastor to have a final conversation and prayer, he couldn't be on the road saying he's going to attend, whether it is in a private home or at a hospital.
You
And that to
remember-
me is still a day of shame for Jamaica in terms of our planning and our understanding of things. But we want to move to a better place.
But I remember my friend who
Yes.
died of COVID, and he was bawling saying, "Can
At
you?"
KPH.
Yeah, and I said, "Can you come?" And I went down there and I said, "No, boss." So my question was, if I am willing to put myself on the line to offer
For
this
the well-being of a
the
brother.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they are saying, "No, you can't come," and it just, I couldn't understand it, and I'm still not understanding it, and I know I'm still hurt by it because he reached out. It's me, I put myself at life and
Yes, yeah.
limb at risk, and they said no.
So, Pastor, we are constantly going to find ourselves confronting this issue of whether we as individuals fully understand and will fight for our fundamental freedoms, and certainly whether or not those who have authority in this country, those whom we elect and who we empower to make decisions for us, whether they have a right understanding and respect for those fundamental rights and freedoms. Today we're talking about the treatment of workers. During the pandemic, you were talking about the concern for the spiritual health and well-being of congregants, of people who look to you for counseling and for support at important times in their life. At the birth of the baby, the christening of the baby, the marriage of the children, and eventually when it comes to it, those final moments when you are leaving this realm and you want to do so in a certain way. The inherent dignity of the person is preserved right up to the time you draw your last breath. And to find that because persons are pretty much now in, they probably say they're in the departure lounge, you have no regard for their desires, and you think that a duty to protect public health allows you to make certain decisions. We're coming back to it, because callers have been pressing us to consider what is happening with World Health Organization. Yesterday there was a caller who spoke at length on it. As our government's leaders, as we are being invited to cede authority for health issues to an international body that don't know us, don't care about us. It's heavily populated by those who once enslaved us. Are we prepared
who will determine what is good for the person on the ground?
Yes.
Because let us not forget, the World Economic Forum and the tenets of it is something that we need to be very aware of in terms of Schwab and his colleagues, in terms of what they are projecting, how we must go in terms of universal income. And a few set of people will say, I determine that's what you must get.
And if we are not educated on it and sensitized to how some of those things go, we're going to find ourselves in a state of confusion, and decisions will be taken for us behind our backs, and by the time we catch up with it, it is a struggle to assert the right position. So we're doing our part here. What would be the victimization waiver? It would no doubt be, the expression was used, and I was trying to find, I don't see it in the law, but I have no doubt that it is a term of art coming out of industry. I'm trying to find where it was mentioned. An unlawful act doesn't carry victimization. Let me see. There's a quote in the Gleaner article. Does not carry. Just trying to get to the story. Doesn't carry victimization. An unlawful act is one that must be prosecuted on the basis of a breach. So that clarification needs to be made by the parties involved. They're quoting someone whom they described. I don't. This story, I want to understand clearly what a victimization waiver is before I say more on it. A seasoned industrial relations expert who declined to go on record told the Gleaner that while workers should not be victimized for actions that shuttered some businesses, schools, and government activities across the country, their actions should not go unpunished. An unlawful act doesn't carry victimization. An unlawful act is one that must be prosecuted on the basis of a breach. So that clarification needs to be made by the parties involved, he said, noting that a passive approach may give rise to industrial action in other sectors. The protest, which impacted more than 500,000 NWC customers, ended on Wednesday, and there's talk of the parties agreed that there would be no victimization on either side arising from the industrial action.
That is no.
Additionally, a consultant is to be procured. Okay, so now the parties agree no victimization. Did you see that in the in the terms of their settled agreement?
No, it was probably just a large page of the thing.
All right, so if the parties agree that there would be no victimization, why on earth would our Prime Minister be consulting on the matter of what action should be taken against the workers?
It was Jeroboam or Rehoboam. Which one of them it was?
Yesterday I was trying to remember which one as well. We can't find it. Anyway, Solomon's son who said, "Your father whipped you. My father whipped you with whatever, but I will whip you with scorpions." Suffice it to say, he was turning up the heat. The Morning Connection. I'm joining you with me in this statement. We speak against any action to be taken, legal or otherwise, against workers who are forced to withdraw their labor in order to bring attention to their plight. So anywhere in government that there is some contemplation that these workers should be taken before the courts and charged with unlawful industrial action, that would be a very, very dark day for Jamaica, because it would mean now that while we ignore the law and the protection that it affords citizens on many, many fronts, while we as government ignore it, we are fully prepared to put its weight against the citizens when they are seeking to agitate for fair treatment. I don't know why the Prime Minister said what he did, because there's no foundation for it. I know he's a well-educated man, so he must know that water services are included in the list of essential services. So for him to announce that he is consulting the Attorney General in order to find out what treatment should be accorded to workers who, if they are a part of the essential service cohort, for him to make that statement is troubling. There's no need for it. And we cannot be pursuing public life on the basis that the rule of law means that he who makes the law rules. The rule of law have an entirely different meaning, and it speaks to all citizens in a country being subject to the same law, to the same degree of severity. So if the workers are to be punished for taking ill-advised industrial action, then the management should be punished for not having a continuity plan in place to mitigate against the effects of that industrial action. Even the army is usually our go-to resource when something happens in an essential service. They are supposed to be well equipped and ready to restore communication services, to handle events at the port. I mean, they're in Denham Town kicking pregnant women and using their guns as weapon against the citizens. Surely they could have been deployed across the island to handle what was happening in the water services.
But it was
I'm just saying.
It was said.
Yes.
He said he's going to instruct the army to turn on back the water. That came out in the press. Yeah, but yeah. Somebody's asking in the chat, did they restore the water for poor people as yet?
Lord Emperor Theophilus, it's not a question of restoration for the poor people. It's a question of provision. Most of the poor people still do not have water. Their gross is of an entirely different order. They've had to be trucking water to communities and buying private water in places. I don't even know how they manage it.
That is not a new story, you know.
That's why yesterday I was saying that some of those communities need to take charge of the water resource and deal with it at a local level. You know, it used to be like that. When I read the National Water Commission Act, one of the provisions they had in it was to allow for the takeover of parish water resources.
Okay.
So there was a time when there was no national delivery system. Each local government did what was necessary in the parish.
Okay.
And there was no doubt a good reason for that. And parishes that don't have as much water resource can share with the neighboring parish. We've got to change up how we're doing things.
It was Rehoboam.
Rehoboam.
So we have no Rehoboam in our country.
Yeah. I looked at the National Water Commission Act, and I have some points I want to raise for public consideration. Did you know that the National Water Commission has the power to raise monies to cover its own expenditures? It can issue a security. It can raise put an instrument on the market.
And they've been doing that.
And bring, but rather than being tied
to the national
to
budget.
the national budget and be limited to what it is that the Minister of Finance does or does not do, they can take some business-like decisions concerning. They could do. There is a they can do like a service. There's a name for it, which from the finance sector that I don't want to be wrong about it, but I'll describe it. They can raise like a social service investment bond that is differently constructed, has a different are you paying attention to me?
Yes, I'm listening. I'm just trying to find the term that you use. Yeah, man.
All right, let me describe what it is that the National Water Commission could do. The National Water Commission could allow its own customers to invest in the building up of its facilities and the retrofitting of what it's doing and the extension of its services, so it covers all of Jamaica, by raising a bond that is differently configured and allow persons a longer period of time, so that it's almost now as if instead of me paying my bill, I could pay my bill with and put extra money on it over a period of time. I'm going to think about it a little bit more, because we can do it in
a return of investment.
Absolutely, you can, right?
So have we not considered that? Because I know for a fact that in recent times the NWC has raised financing, whether through the capital houses, NWCs, or so on.
Very expensive, and government has had to pay it back.
Yeah, because even though they can do it independent of government, ultimately the debt is the people of Jamaica.
We could carry the debt.
Right, yeah. Who hold it and pay
Yeah,
it back.
we could carry that debt. So, and the reason I'm saying it is because, and it's not to incite secession from central government, but my belief is that communities can begin to look at ways to plan and handle some of these essential services where the citizens invest in it, and you find a way to insulate yourself from the meanness and the fickleness of central government. There are ways that we can do it.
Right, so
I'll think about it some more and talk to you, Pastor, because even as we are innovating for our 1660 projects, and we are going to look at ways to fund it, we have to look at ways where we can fund it safely, based on some long-term commitments that will not place either person's well-being or financial security at risk. So I looked at that and I said, so what is it that has happened with NWC, why they, providing as important a service as they do, why they can't find a way to treat their staff better, and they're stuck in this place of being very necessary to life but not being able to sustain life for their own people at a dignified level. Yeah. Because all these things, when we talk about them, we need to be able to anchor them in some universal or international best practice model. I thought I would just take a look and refer to some of the fundamental principles that come out of the International Labour Organization. Since, if we're gonna give up our rights to WHO, we might as well look at some of the other UN-based agencies that touch and concern public life. There are some universal rights of workers, and Jamaica is a signatory to the relevant declarations. They're looked at in 4 categories. The first one is freedom of association, which calls into play the recognition of collective bargaining rights, your freedom to associate and unionize. The second category of rights fall under the elimination of forced or compulsory labor, which means you have the right to withdraw your work, to terminate your contract of employment if you are dissatisfied with terms and conditions. That right is recognized. And that right is recognized to the extent that it cannot be diminished or eliminated by artful legal provisions which render unlawful the steps that you take in order to enjoy that right. So, it is kind of the same thing we've been talking about in some other settings where you criminalize, the parliament takes a decision to criminalize otherwise lawful behavior. For example, when it comes to decisions that you take concerning your health, certain choices are criminalized. When it comes to activities that you might pursue in the privacy of your home, certain conduct is criminalized. So, for example, we could criminalize beating children. We could say that parents no longer have the right to strike a child as a form of punishment. If you strike your child in private and your child is aware that that is a criminal act, then so we know that certain things can be criminalized. The elimination of forced or compulsory labor is one of the fundamental achievements of this time. The third category is the abolition of child labor. So when you see children working at the street corners, whether they're vending or they are wiping windshield, or you see them at work in different places,
Markets.
and they are not, even if you own a business and you put your child to work in it, that's wrong.
15.
That's wrong. Okay, and the last category is the elimination of discrimination in respect of employment and occupation. So there are 4 categories of universal rights of the workers that are recognized, and all member states are under an obligation to ensure that there is a system in their country to protect and to promote those rights, and for workers to be able to enforce those rights. We saw during the pandemic that issues about workers' rights came up when employers wanted to mandate vaccine therapies as a part of safeguarding public health. And we saw that some of the employers in Jamaica didn't do too well, didn't look too,
Big stick.
they took the big stick approach. And I'm telling you that a lot of upset and overflow of emotion is going to be occurring in days to come. So
Well, I think
both
so.
employers, because prices are rising and wages are not.
Yeah, but the
What do you think?
I think that's gonna happen. But even as you refer to the pandemic and the people saying if you are not vaccinated you can't come to work, and they did it and use moral suasion. What is emerging now is the vaccine injury, and the question is, I was okay before this.
Yeah,
Now
who
I'm taking-
covers me?
Who covers me? And it is a big thing in the States, around the world, where it is emerging that, hold on, something was wrong. And even with the WHO and that treaty that they are pushing, Big Pharma, a lot of people are alleging is what control WHO. So we have to be wondering what's going to happen, because people have died, and the only thing that has moved them along to this position of kicking the bucket, as some people said, the only thing that has happened to them, normal healthy persons, was the taking of this vaccine. And that information is emerging worldwide in terms of some countries saying no more, we're not doing this no more, because the studies are starting to emerge where in like 23 countries they're saying, in Europe, they're saying this thing has impacted especially our young people, our young men, in regards to pericarditis, myocarditis, in terms of their functioning. Yeah, so boy, may I tell you, I don't see,
So there's a lot to come.
yeah, there's
a
a
lot
whole
to
lot
come.
to come in and prepare people. Yeah.
We need to be prepared in our understanding of the issues and in the positions that we ought reasonably to take on some of these issues.
Okay.
So yeah, I think we're gonna have
I will
another.
continue to go into the break. I think we're preparing for that. I just went to the NWC webpage,
Yes.
and they have said that between 2010 and 2011, they spent time planning and preparing for the implementation of a transformative program over the next 5 to 10 years as part of its Vision 2030 program. What they said is that they plan to spend an estimated $100 billion for water supply and a further $75 billion for wastewater. And what they have set themselves is to move Jamaica's direct house to house from 73% to 85% and to become the number one person in the Caribbean and Latin America in terms of water things.
All right, time for a break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Good morning and welcome back to the Morning Connection. During the break, we had to dig deep and decide on what we're going to say for International Nurses Day, especially because we didn't start off making the announcement early in the morning, and we do have a nurse in the family, Elder Michelle Palmer, the wife to Elder Pastor Palmer. Or did I
Yes.
give you the Elder Pastor? You're an Elder Pastor.
Whatever that is.
Michelle, just for you, we're going to make a lot of noise about International Nurses Day. Pastor, you take it from there because she's yours.
She's always mine.
Mm,
And
so-
she decided that she'd be mine over 28. But I really do.
Hold on a minute. How long you been married?
28 years. I really do celebrate
She was a
her.
child bride?
I really do celebrate her as a wonderful nurse. Caring, compassionate, which is an attribute that I've recognized over the years. I go into a setting and you're talking to people, and the way how they respond, you says, "Are you a nurse?" She say yes, because they are always caring, compassionate, looking always for the interests of others. I really do celebrate my wife as a nurse, but I also celebrate all the nurses all over Jamaica who are doing a wonderful job. Big up to you and to the other nurses I know. My sister-in-law is a nurse, that's Doreen Ferran, working all the way over in St. Anne as a nurse working in the community. So all the nurses that I know, Paulette, that's Paulette Palmer, that's another nurse. To my sister, who is a nurse, but she's not here, she's overseas. To all the nurses, may you have a wonderful day, and we truly appreciate you for the work that you do sacrificially, tirelessly, every single day. Thank you very much.
So, of course, I listened to the list of nurses that you know, and you know quite a few.
Yes, man.
Yeah.
I could go on. I could go on.
Yes, please don't go on. So I'm going to address the many nameless, faceless nurses who are doing duty on, I just jokingly said there's no more a front line, but who are doing duty on the front line. Nursing is the profession. Do you know, there are two professions which I've discovered are way more important than doctors. We always talk about doctors, nurses and pharmacists.
Okay. I can understand the
Nurses-
nurse, because the nurse keep the doctor from doing some things some of the time. Say, doctor, that not gonna work.
Well, the same thing with the pharmacist where the drug is concerned.
Yes.
I mean, a good pharmacist is a greater resource than a good doctor in many instances, because a lot of the ailments and the things that will happen to you, you might not make it into the doctor's office, but you'll make it to the pharmacy.
Okay.
And if you have a nurse in the community, oh well, you are wonderfully served. But nursing is a profession which focuses on the care of individuals, families, and communities.
Yeah.
And the fact
Never
that
nurse.
they serve at the community level is perhaps the most wonderful thing about what they do. So we celebrate nurses for the contribution that they make to the health and well-being of families and communities.
Yeah, and it's important, even as we're celebrating Child Month, for the antenatal, prenatal care that they do. A lot of what happens is in the communities, in terms of the nurses who are going out into those places that the person would normally not come out there, in the communities, ensuring that our children at the earliest stages are taken well care of today. So we celebrate our nurses today.
And you know what? I discovered the nurses have long memories. Do you know, in my community where I grew up in St. Anne, one of the most celebrated community member was the nurse.
Yes.
And nurse was also the midwife.
Yes.
So although she did not attend at my birth because I arrived before she did, still she regards me as one of her babies.
She does.
So when I was a young girl and I would come home from boarding school, and there were some persons that my mother would say you have to go and visit, and nurse was one of them. Nurse had to see that you were maintaining good body weight and growth. I
So,
know.
right.
I think I might have been a little disappointment to her because I was not growing as
Fast as you should have.
I remained quite short.
She never
Well,
remembered that you ladies don't grow tall, and probably that's what happened.
well, maybe I wasn't a lady.
No,
I didn't miss that what
Always a
you're
lady.
saying.
No, man.
No, my niece is about 6 feet tall, so in my family there are some ladies who grow
You have a
and
6
grow.
feet, almost a 6 feet tall niece?
Is she 6 feet? About 6'1"? It's about 6'1",
Wow,
and beautiful.
that's tall. That's
Yeah,
tall.
my sister whom you met, her daughter, and my sister is that. I mean, she looks shorter now, but when I was young, she was about 5'10".
She was tall. Okay.
No, I'm joking. It's just that I was small and everybody
Oh
looked
yes,
tall.
yes, right. I
But
can
she's
understand
not short. She's not short like me and Eden.
that. But she's on the taller side.
Yeah, she's.
The father genes.
Yeah. No, my father is notoriously. My mother was taller than my dad.
Okay. So
But
it
my
comes from that side
mother,
of the family.
yeah, my mother is a Wint, and if you think Arthur Wint and his height,
Oh yeah, yeah. You were
and
tall.
and
man.
they all tend to kind of look like that. Eden's dad and myself are the shortest ones.
Oh, so that-
I'm the shortest of my mother's children.
okay.
Everybody else is brushing 6, just a little under. Yeah, so the genetics didn't lie on my mother's side, man. They get the long legs and the hawkish looking nose and a kind of austere personality.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got some of that too. All right. Let's kind of take the temperature down a bit. We've been speaking of things to come, and because Percival and I, we announced it probably roundabout when many others were doing so. The battlefield of the mind is the theater of war for this season. We've been talking about the looming overflow of emotion, I'm calling it, with workers and workers' rights, and we need to understand workers' rights, and we need to respect the fact that those who provide services in some critical areas do have the right to withdraw their services, and some of them will not come back. We've seen that happening with the nurses. There's been some talk about the fact that we're losing many of our nurses, happily going off.
She was lamenting it. That's it.
Yes.
Head of the Nurses
Yes,
Association.
and she was lamenting it on 2 grounds. One, we don't pay them well. 2, we don't have the facilities to train them to the level of skill and excellence that some of them desire.
Okay. I never knew that was a problem.
Yes,
in
she
regards
mentioned that because she said they're looking to enter into some partnerships with I think hospitals overseas where the nurses can go and upgrade their skills and bring back that excellence to Jamaica. But for them to come back, it means we have to be prepared to pay them well and to treat them way better than they're being treated. The same for our teachers.
Same for the police.
And the same for law enforcement.
Yeah.
So unless we want to become a country where private security guards are doing more work in safeguarding our neighborhoods than the police force whom our tax dollars covers, then we gotta take a right position on these things.
Are we just going to enlarge the army more?
Well, do you know that, of course, the obligation to maintain an army was so that as a dependent or an associate of the Queen, when she called out for arms, for armed men,
That was
we
the
could supply.
motivation?
Of course. Why else? What war Jamaica going to fight?
Because Costa Rica don't have an army.
But we don't, when I was much younger, I constantly advocated for the defunding of the army. Constantly. It was one of my platforms in my college days, university days. We do not need an army. We have army, you're going to try find things to do. They said the devil find work to give idle hands. You're just going to find things for them to do. But it was an important part of our commitment to the Queen and the Commonwealth that should she need to call for soldiers, all the colonies could participate. And it makes sense.
That makes sense.
It makes sense. So now, when
It's to
we...
defend you.
Right. Defend the crown.
I thought it was to defend the country.
From what? We are our greatest threat.
It
And we don't need the army to be deployed against us, which is really what has happened.
about.
If we didn't have an army, we would depend on the police and we would treat them better. The money that they spend on the army, spend it on the police.
Yeah, that is one of what
And-
Congress
and-
have advocated
yeah.
away, because he raised it. I remember he says, I'm not understanding something. Why is so much resources going to the army and not to the police, who constantly cry that they need more resources in terms of things that they need to properly fight crime?
Spend it on the police. I tell you, you can see where this would go if Percival and I got a chance at running this country. And to look at you when I say that.
Well, we are running the country in a way, if you think about it.
Well, if we got to make some decisions and
yeah, and responsibility.
yeah. As it is, we are trying to open up conversations and
And
educate.
challenging our people to think
Yes.
another way.
Yes.
Think another way about the issues, because it's not producing the desired result that you need, and that is why we do that. Last night I as I told you, I made a presentation to some church leaders out of one of our denominations, and I pointed out to them, you have to ensure for yourselves that you understand your calling, your motivations are right, and the things that you do intentionally, because what you do as a leader reflects not only on you, but even as a pastor, leader, deacon, it reflects on the people you have a responsibility for. And that brings us back to the whole issue that we've been talking about. What the leader does impacts the people. What the leader does impacts the people. You can either go up or down based on the leader. So the motivations and the thinking and the mindset of the leader is so important. Will there be flourishing? Will there be destruction? But the thoughts of the leader will go a long way in terms of where the organization, the church, the country, the school goes, and that becomes very important. You know, I'm reflecting also on some work I did 10 years ago, yeah, in some schools, and what struck me as I moved between different schools based on the intervention that was being done, the leader sets the tone of the school. I could reach a school because I had to go out early in the mornings to interact with the staff, and I go to a school and you're wondering what is happening here. School's supposed to call and you're going, hello. It's like school is not in session, and they were doing all different kind of things. And then I drive 10 miles to another school in the same parish, and you're going, is there a school happening here? Everything falls and rides on leadership. It was such a strong lesson contrast to me. Leadership is important. Leadership is vital. Yeah.
Pastor Percival, we are going to be joined on phone by Winsome Callum in a short while. So it is not that I want to disturb the flow of things.
No, man, no, but it's important.
But I want to raise an issue that we're going to be touching on in the coming weeks. It has to do with land ownership and the resettlement of persons who are now being called squatters. And you know, even as I'm saying this, there's a bit of sadness. I can see it. Miss Barbara Gludon, the announcement of her death has just been made public. And it seems too that she followed that just a few days after her husband. So I tell you, if
you have lived
I
together
say
for
to
a long time.
yeah, yes, and if you're fortunate and you've lived together for a long time, you will go just like that, a few days apart, if not at the same time.
Because she kind of says,
So, gosh, the Morning Connection, which is following in the footstep of Miss Gludon, who was a radio personality of no mean order. We express our condolences to her family, those who have survived her, and her many friends and well-wishers who no doubt are saddened by her loss. I didn't mention it earlier too, but the producer and I are also mourning the loss of a friend. on which day was it? Tuesday morning. On Tuesday morning, I was expressing birthday wishes to two persons, and the producer reminded me of a third. Well, it transpired that our good friend Elaine Thompson, known by many as Sunshine or as E.T., she was a queen in the tax authority's office for many years. Sunshine passed away on Monday. So when we were saying happy birthday to her on Tuesday morning, we did not know that she was no more. Very saddened by her loss as well. But recognizing that those who have lived a life of purpose, who finish them race with
Yes.
distinction,
Mm-hmm.
who, if you're of that inclination, earn them crown,
Yes.
and have just kind of laid down their armor. We celebrate and thank God for the time they
impact.
spent and the impact they had and the way they inspired us, and we just remain motivated and ready to do the same when our time comes. I don't want to feel like there was a single thing I left, important thing that I did not do. And even the things that you need to say and the things you need to teach, you gotta say it now, do it now. Our friend was in Jamaica in April, and let me tell you, it was, with hindsight now, I should have known. There was no expression of love or friendship. There was no act of generosity. We cooked for her. She came home. She wanted roast breadfruit and ackee and saltfish. And if you know the trouble that I went through to find that breadfruit, including some breadfruits didn't cut the grade, and the producer said that breadfruit not ready. And we were driving all around trying to find the right breadfruit.
That was
So we could for E.T. She wanted. Yes, and I even managed to find an avocado, a pear.
Okay.
Saying avocado from Mexico. No, pear from St. Mary. I even managed to find pear and made lemonade so she could have. She'd been living abroad, you see, so she died in Florida. After her retirement from the tax authority, she moved to Florida where her children were. And she took ill on Mother's Day.
Wow.
She took ill on Mother's Day, and by the early hours of the Monday morning, she had passed away. It was just the saddest thing to see. Her name popped up on my phone when I got home after the show, and I thought she was calling because she does listen to the show, so we've lost a listener. She listens to the show as well, so I thought she was calling, so I was thinking I should have called her first, but I did say happy birthday on air, but it was a male voice, and the moment I heard the voice, I said, what happened to E.T.?
And he said mommy passed.
She had passed. No, it was her nephew.
Okay.
But you could see he had been bracing himself to share the news. But the moment I heard a voice other than hers calling from her number, I just knew that it's because she couldn't call.
Yeah.
And it was. So, death is something that I am comfortable with, to be truthful.
I am too.
You do so many funerals that it would be a mess if you were not comfortable. You could not be otherwise. So you tell it.
No, but I'm just saying, one of the fears that I lived with until in my 20s was the fear of death. Because a lot of us live with death in mind, and we are saying, if we die now, what will happen? But I settled that question, so as I say to my children and people around about me, death no longer holds any terror to me. And as a believer in the fact that when we die, it is a transition to something that is greater. Bring it on. I remember Paul saying, I'm caught in two minds. If I should stay, or if I should go. But while I'm here, I'm going to live and going to walk in my purpose to the end. And as he says, fought a good fight, finished the race, and there's laid up for me a reward. And he could go out of here. So he was crucified. It's really drop all that. But be ready for that. Because there is them accountability that is happening. That will come. Yeah. No fear.
Yeah, so the last minutes, let us the question that I'm going to be grappling with shall battle in days to come. And I'm going just a segment of Ezekiel's article concerning land ownership and reparative justice. If our caller is listening, he will recognize his own sense in what I'm about to say because we've had a caller who says down the side of the world, massive land grab going on. People of wealth are just seizing and taking control of whatever land they can, and huge acreage, not a square of land to build a house and have a garden to sustain your family. Ezekiel has written on the issue, and I've read a bit of it, and it's well worth reading. And she asks, what do we believe the descendants of enslaved Africans are now due on this land? What is available for those who were impoverished through slavery and have been unable to rise above the waters of history in the 21st century? As we think on the tasks before us at 60 years of independence, do we believe it is our duty to create a just society premised on the fair distribution of the resources of the land? Do we believe it, Percival?
I don't think we believe that. The government doesn't believe it. They could say, oh, we're trying to legalize tenure, but there's so much more that successive governments could have done in terms of, as you have been advocating on this program. We can do the restorative reparations now in terms of giving land, because it's our land. We call it crown land, but that's our land.
So, to come. Alright, are we at the, should we take the break now? Let's take a break. When we return, it will be with Miss Callum to speak to us on matters pertaining to very, very important issue. Energy. Can we afford it? How do we afford it? How do we manage during this time? So please stay with us. We'll be right back. Pastor, a quick draw. Good morning, welcome back. We are so pleased to welcome to our program Miss Winsome Callum. Hello, Winsome. Good morning.
Morning, Winsome.
Good morning. All right, but we have some good news for Winsome because we're looking at today's.
Lena.
Yes.
Lena cartoon.
Are you hearing us, Winsome? Good morning. Good morning. Okay, we're not hearing her yet, but while we get that sorted out. Boy, it's a it's a tale of two cities.
Because the little guy who Mr. Reddy, who represents JPS, cause remember the guy with the shock things coming on the light bulb and his ears
and his
are
nose.
and his thing, and he has his cargo chain.
Yes, this is the last May cartoon for today. It's a keeper. Good morning. Oh no, I'm not hearing her.
Hello.
All right, we're not hearing her, but yes. So let's talk about the cartoon because if she's hearing us at all, if Winsome is hearing us at all, let me just describe the cartoon that is up just above the Gleaner's editorial today. It is the little.
I'm really not hearing. I don't know if you are hearing me.
I'm hearing you now.
I'm hearing you now.
But it should be on air.
Let's see if we can go ahead.
Would
Could
you,
you repeat the question?
would you give us a minute, please, Winsome? I think we're gonna have to call you back, perhaps.
Okay.
Just.
Thanks.
All right. So, for the benefit of our listeners, if you're not looking at today's Gleaner, the picture that's worth 1,000 words is of the little electricity man saying, "Rotted citizens protesting. Is what me do now? Oh, it's not me this time." And of course, Madam Citizen, she has a haircut like mine. Madam Citizen with her little son have two signs. One said, "We're suffering from high NWC bills," and the other sign said, "Water is life." And Mr. Citizen is there too. I've not seen him
No
before.
long time. Yeah, that's a new one.
Yes. Madam Public has a husband now, or there's a man standing beside her that is saying, "We need water
Is that
in
a
our
good
pipes."
sign? Is that a good sign?
Well, you
For
tell me
normal
because
to
you
be the
do weddings
female.
as well.
A female. That's a good sign. That's a good sign. That's a good sign.
Yeah, this showing that it's a family
It's
issue.
a family issue. Yes.
Yeah, there's the little kid, and they're all dressed in black as if
Yes.
going to a funeral.
Yay.
Oh, really? All right, we're trying to get it sorted out so we can welcome Miss Callum to the program. And perhaps we could just. Good morning.
Winsome, you're hearing us?
No, I don't hear her responding. What might be the solution to this one? All right, before we went on the break, we were talking a little bit about reparatory justice as it relates to land ownership. And it is one of the items that we are going to spend some time on, because we do want to promote an environment in which persons can see their way to solving this problem without bloodshed and without civil unrest. But so too, the issues concerning the average citizen's ability to cover the cost of some critical expenditures. We recognize that right below water in the list of essential services was electricity.
Yes, it is. It was,
Yeah.
yes.
And we are so accustomed to maligning JPS as the
worst.
main provider, certainly the one we get to deal with because they own the public distribution system. We're so accustomed to being at odds with them that many times we don't bother to understand.
What goes into
Yeah.
to delivering the service,
Right.
because they own some of the generation, but they are the persons who are responsible for the distribution network. So
Are you hearing me now, Winsome? Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, I am.
okay,
Yes, and I'm hearing her
We're hearing
quite
you
well
now.
in my headphones as well.
okay. So we were just looking at the paper this morning, Miss Callum, and we saw last May article, and he was saying here, what do you call him? Kilo, what? Kilo is his name? Is Kilo is his name? The cartoon character. The cartoon character. That is, if you look in it, it's.
What you said earlier.
Oh, we're looking in the Gleaner this morning, and there's a cartoon by Lasme, and he's saying, "Rotted citizens protesting is what me do now." Oh, it's not me this time. So the focus is not on you. You got it? You see what I'm talking about?
Oh my God! Yes, yes, yes.
So
And it's very funny because I saw a clip on Twitter where a customer was saying, "Come on, JPS, this is the water now. What kind of food?" And I thought it's so interesting. It's that JPS was called so it's not surprising that Lasme would have a cartoon like that today. But yes, it's something that happens to utilities because we're an essential service. We get called on a lot.
right. So all right. So okay. So that's interesting. So you are not the person on walking the gauntlet today. So how are you today? As we
I'm very good, but for some reason you're really far and I'm not hearing you very clearly. But let's see. Let's see.
okay.
You're not hearing us clearly, Winsome?
I'm hearing you very, very clearly, but I'm not hearing.
Percival.
I'm hearing her too. Yes. Yes. You hearing me?
A very.
All right. I think we need to take a break and sort out the volume or whatever the audio issue. We will call you back. I hope you have time.
Okay then.
All right. Give us a minute.
They're not going over. All right. So
Yeah, we're gonna call back. We're gonna call Winsome again. We at least got the opportunity to give her the good news that NWC has replaced JPS as public enemy number one. Not good news for the citizen though, because we cannot do well with two critical services. I was saying to Percival that the second in line to water as an essential service is electricity. And there are days when I feel like, certainly in my house, electricity is more important than water. You know why?
tell me why.
I have a pool of water in my backyard.
Oh, I can
So,
understand.
for example, when the pipes were dry, producer went and got 2 buckets of water, dropped some bleach in it, and we were ready to go.
Okay. I don't understand.
Yeah, right. And in other occasions like hurricane and no water, we would take water from the pool that is in the backyard. And persons who have blacktop, what do they call them? The rhino tanks.
Yes. It's a
Persons who
brand
have the rhino tanks on the roof or in the ground or whatever, can manage to supply their own need
Right time.
for a time.
Or you have the big 55-gallon
Right.
water drums.
Yeah. But if you don't have a generator, and if you can't afford to keep your generator filled with
Gasoline.
electricity turns out to be more important, especially if you're running if you're homeschooling or online schooling, whatever the situation might be. So, in terms of our ability to function in a modern society and to take care of some basic needs, electricity is very important.
That's in some societies because some people don't have electricity. Water is more crucial to them, you know. So
Yeah.
so it depends on the context, I believe, that you
Yeah.
you live in. But as you talk about water in us, when we used to have water lockups, or those of us who are old enough to remember Gilbert and how that impacted. You remember Gilbert?
Mm-hmm.
You remember Gilbert?
I
Okay.
do. I was in Barbados.
Oh, so you never experienced
I did
Gilbert.
not experience Gilbert. I experienced the earthquake that was in the aftermath of Gilbert. But you know, coming home after that hurricane, my first great rush of love for Jamaica, I experienced it when I arrived at Norman Manley Airport. Just looking at Jamaica. Jamaica have personality and presence, you know. When you come home and seeing the Warwicker hillside stripped bare, not a green leaf inside, I cried. I could not believe it.
Are you serious?
Twice I realized that my country is more than just, land and a place where I live. Twice. And both occasions was returning after having been away for a while. So I was a student coming home.
Nostalgic.
No, more than nostalgia. I mean, I've reunited with people, with individuals, and not felt so strong a rush of emotion.
Wow.
Twice. The first time was coming home and seeing Jamaica stripped of her beauty. Gilbert had just ravaged the land, and seeing not a green thing in sight and things lying on the ground and so on brought tears to my eyes. And the second time I felt it now was I was living abroad, having gone to the BVI to set up law firm for the law firm that I then worked with, and I was away for probably about 18 months. It's the longest I've been away since studying abroad. And I came home for a law seminar, and we were hosted at a hotel somewhere in the North Coast. And one evening, the evening after dinner, I went and sat on the beach and just sat on the sand, and sitting there and feeling the warmth of the water, because the Caribbean Sea is warm in the night. If you all don't remember, the sea is warm in the night. Sitting there and feeling the warmth of the water and just watching and feeling it, I'm like, this is my home. This is my home. This is my home.
Are you serious? Anyway.
I'm kind of sentimental.
It's an enigma to me because she's as tough as nail, and then she's.
And then I'll cry for my country. I cry for my country all the time.
We
all the
continue
time.
to cry for our country.
Yeah, and I tell you, you see this article that the lady wrote about, land and squatters and the way we treat people when we say they have no right to be on a spot of land, and we tear them off it and bulldoze whatever it is they had built up and so on. It's heartbreaking to me, because I know that you can have a relationship with land, real relationship, that it hurt you to be separated from it the same way it would hurt you to be separated from a person. And for some people it may hurt them even more.
Let them grieve.
You grieve
You
all
grieve.
the memories that you have, the important moments of your life that were celebrated in that certain spot, and the children grow up there, and your grandmother, and this is where you do your first bush cooking, and there are some memories.
Things.
There are some memories that I tell you, in the times of hardship, my first building that I bought for business, I had to sell it. Well, I didn't sell it. It's a long story, but suffice it to say, I lost that building, and I can't drive on that part of the street downtown.
Oh, okay.
Good morning, Miss Winsome. Are you there? Good morning. I'm not hearing her, but at least it broke the mood, because every time I enter that street and I look down and I see the building, it's still there because the people who bought it haven't torn it down yet. it just breaks my heart because I remember, you know, and that building is part of the carousel meltdown.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was used as security for some of the borrowings, the funding of the business, and of course when the government tore down the business and the whole thing died, we suffered a lot of loss, and that building ended up being sold as part of the recovery of monies to pay out creditors. Was not my wish for that to happen, but when it did, I just had to say to myself, okay, you bought a building, you bought one before, you can buy another one.
But it sounds like you're still grieving. So
I am still grieving.
On the stage of denial, on anger. You
want to listen to me. You cannot therapize me without a couch. Good morning. Let us hope that it works this time.
Now?
Hi, morning. Yes.
Oh, yay! Both Percy and myself love you dearly, but we're quite excited to hear your voice this morning.
Well, I thank you for that. I've decided that I will come into studio if we're going to have this conversation again, because the connection can be so unpredictable.
Well, it was not our intention to lure you into studio.
Whatever you did work.
But it worked. It worked, and we're very pleased to welcome you to the program. Many of our listeners were just not intrigued, but I think if you had stayed on to hear anything, no, you were going into a meeting. Listen, man, you dominated the matters that you raised, the suggestions and so on. We had like 2 or 3 callers who followed after with expressing great appreciation. One man has volunteered to participate in one of our programs and to give tips to customers because he had in the past done a similar show on another radio station where that's what they did. So what you contributed last week and what we are doing together is of great value, and I thank you for coming on board with it. Already this morning we see you are no longer public enemy number 1.
Not even number 2, okay?
In fact, let me tell you, you are quite the hero at this time, because one, just the readiness, JPS's readiness to speak out and to be a partner with your customers in surviving these times. It has certainly benefited me, understanding that the company has a focus of encouraging and promoting knowledge and awareness on customers to conserve and to pretty much reduce your revenue so we can have a better existence, because that's what it means when we pay you less, you earn less.
Well, I think there is quite a bit of misunderstanding of how JPS operates, and so it's important for us to keep the conversation going. There are 2 things that actually cause this. One is this monopoly status.
Yes.
It doesn't make anybody happy, and so you start off right there being a monopoly, and the cost of the product or service that you provide is really relatively expensive when you look at what people earn. So you begin there where persons are not very, very happy about you because of the monopoly status and the cost of the service. And then you have the complexity of our business. Right now it's surprising persons how many elements of the bill JPS has no control over.
Yes.
We talk about the bill, everybody just really cuss out JPS and blame JPS thief and things like that. We understand the frustration and the anger, but for most of the bill that you get, JPS has very little control over it. I might have mentioned that the fuel portion of the bill is over 50%. Over 50%, and that is the cost of the fuel that we buy from others to use to make electricity, and we have no control over the price.
Now, many years ago, JPS, along with the government, decided that we need diversification, so we cannot be dependent on one source of fuel. And so we introduced LNG along with the oil that we've always used. And what the fact though is that LNG is bought overseas and imported into Jamaica. So just like oil, it is affected by whatever is happening on the world market. So another question you're going to ask me is, why aren't we using more of our natural resources like solar and wind? And the answer to that is that we are in fact using and adding more and more renewables. However, renewables are not always available. As a matter of fact, in Jamaica, as much as we have a lot of sun and we feel that we are, just having all of this resource at our fingertips. If you look outside now, the sky is overcast. We have a lot of cloud cover. We're not getting any energy from the solar panels that have been installed and that feed into the grid. Because right now we actually buy solar from what we call independent power producers who sell electricity to the grid.
Yes.
And the reason why we can't be 100% dependent on renewables is because of conditions like this. When there's no sun, there is no energy from solar. So we have to have backup power.
Right.
So in the past 4 or 5 years, we've seen a significant increase in the amount of solar on the grid. But at the same time, we have to put in backup power. So what's happening now that we have no energy from sun, we have to use the backup power that we have put in place. So there's a lot that persons don't understand, and it is our responsibility to have these conversations and ensure that there is greater understanding. And hopefully, people will just recognize that this is a partnership. It's not about JPS robbing anybody. It's really about JPS helping us all to work together. We need the utility company. The utility company needs us as consumers. So it's a partnership.
Well, there is the fact too that you are on a path to give customers greater autonomy over managing their consumption and their expenditure. I think any company that is prepared to put such power in the hands of their customers has to be moving on a path of honesty and transparency that would give greater comfort. I am one of the customers. I confess it with a little shame, but freely. I am one of the customers that said JPS robbed me, because I what I see is escalating cost, and my sometimes I think that my profile or my consumption is even being reduced because I'm doing everything I can to conserve, and the bill keeps going higher. So I then just said JPS robbed me. But when you begin to put some power in my hand so I can better understand, I think when the leader of your business came out and said over 40% is tax, or I forgot what they, but you could at least correct me on that if I got it wrong. But a high percentage is tax on fuel, consumption tax when you add it all up.
Right. So the tax that he's speaking about is correct. It's the tax that the corporate tax that JPS has to pay.
Yes.
The tax on the oil, the tax on the fuel, and then you have GCP.
And then GCP.
So every single thing that goes into the production of electricity is taxed.
It's taxed.
And we pay corporate tax at the highest level. And so whatever we put into the production of electricity actually is reflected in the cost of the service. And taxes is one component. You have, as I said, the fuel and the infrastructure investment that has to be done, or we have a system that deteriorates, and all the other costs. And then when you get your bill, there is the GCC that is applied, which is a cost, government cost. So there are several things, as I said earlier, that you probably do not have control over as a consumer, and JPS doesn't have
Control over it either.
So
Yes.
what we want to talk about is what you do have control over as a consumer and what JPS has control over as a utility provider. So as a consumer, you definitely have control over how you use the energy.
Usage.
And you're right. People say that they do everything, but the cost is not going down. In some cases, what the bill amount looks like it's going up,
It's
even
going
though they are
up.
conserving. And the truth is that does happen, because you will see that you use 200 kilowatt hours this month and it comes out to $14,000, but next month you use it and it looks like a different figure. It might be 30,000 something, or it might be closer to 15,000. And that's because of the movement, primarily the
Exchange rate.
movement in the price of oil
Right.
and also the foreign exchange movement. So sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. What do you do as the consumer? You see, conservation is not about just stopping the use of your appliances or unplugging or turning off. It's also about deciding what is important to you and use that and take off the others that are not important to you. You do not need to leave your Wi-Fi plugged in and your TV and microwave plugged in if you're not in the house. You can unplug them because they use what we call phantom power. Once the light is on, electricity is being used. So you unplug those, but leave your fridge plugged in. So it's
Yeah.
really little things like that
Yes.
that we need to look at in terms when we conserve. It's not just JPS that tell us to plug out everything. No, we just want you to be smart about how you use the energy.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. From the time you spoke, when I leave the room, I turn off the fan. Some of us have the idea. I think. I'm asking for a friend. Some people have the idea that when each time a device has to start up, it pulls it makes a draw of energy, and therefore it's better if you just leave it plugged in. And then when you're ready to use it, you can increase the speed or whatever. I got what you said about phantom power with the ones that at least carry a light. But is there any logic or science behind persons being careful about not, like when you rev the engine it uses more gas or some such false
Yes,
science?
there is some science behind that, but it applies to. It's difficult to make a broad statement that it's better to leave the thing plugged in. A lot depends on the actual equipment itself, the rating of the equipment, and how it operates. Personally, I know that some persons unplug their refrigerators to save energy, but I do not recommend it, because in a lot of cases, when you leave the fridge unplugged for a long time, it has to work so much harder to get cool. So I do not necessarily recommend unplugging it.
And when it works
Have
harder,
devices
it consumes
called
more
timers
energy.
that you can use to manage the time you keep the refrigerator on, which is much better than unplugging it, because when you unplug it, it has to work so much harder, use up so much energy to start up. But as I said, it's difficult to use one statement to apply to everything. It really depends on the type of equipment and how that equipment works.
So now there is an obligation on consumers to educate themselves on the appliances that they have. Don't just choose something because it's pretty or the color match what the color scheme in your kitchen. I'm guilty.
That's right. And sometimes we say, like, I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and she said, look at my neighbor, her bill is lower than mine, I will have the same thing. Now, when you look at what the neighbor has, the neighbor might look like she has the same thing, but her AC is a different brand altogether.
Yes.
And her brand is, even though both of them are inverters, that brand is way more
Superior.
efficient than the brand that she was talking about. So there are many things like that. So one thing I will say before I leave is, let's start with at the point of buying your appliances. Always look for the most efficient appliance. Ask questions. one question to ask is, was this made to operate on a 50 cycle system? Now, why 50 cycle? The system we have in Jamaica is 50 cycle. The system we have in the US is 60 cycle. There's some appliances that we buy in the US and bring into Jamaica that will work fine, but there are others that deteriorate in efficiency over time.
Over time.
It might work, like the washing machine, for example. It will work, but over time, it is not as efficient. The rotor, the speed, it slows down because it is not operating on the right cycle. You do have some equipment though that are made to operate on both 50-60 cycles. So look out for those, and if you get the 50-60, you're fine. If you get the 50 cycle, you're even better. But the 60 cycle, it's fine. It will work for a while, but it will use up more energy. So those are some of the small things that you have to think about. If you're going shopping, start right there.
And if persons are sending gifts, some gifts become very expensive because somebody sends you something and you start to use it, not recognizing that it actually increases your overhead. I want to ask you a very, very outrageous question. Are you ready?
Yes, but it has to be the last question. I'm sorry because I have to run.
Yeah, and,
yes.
And we lost some time with you, so we have to catch up next week. The question is this: why are we 50 cycle when our closest neighbor and supplier of goods and services is 60? Is it a question of legacy equipment, or
Yes. Short answer: it is
legacy.
Now, we as a British colony, if I can still use that word, we would have inherited what the British had and what was installed as a result of that relationship. And we're not the only country like that. Several countries that were that British ruled would have had this 50 cycle. Now, the question has been asked before, Minette, why are we still on a 50 cycle?
But true, you said last question.
The change out of a system, like a national grid from 50 cycles to 60 is outrageously expensive. It would not be something that our customers would want to pay for or be a part of at all. So it's not at this point an option for the grid to be changed to 60 cycle. That's not an option. I do not believe that the OUR would approve that kind. From a national perspective, it wouldn't be in the best interest of the country to try to attempt to do that.
Yes, sir.
So what we try to do is, as best as possible, get the 50-60 cycle, things that are coming from the US that can work on a 50 cycle system.
All right. Winsome, thank you so much. It is always a pleasure. This morning was exceptional too because you showed such patience with us.
We'll see you in studio next week.
Yeah, in studio next week.
Yes, I will be there. And thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay then. Bye-bye.
Bye. I don't think it would have been appropriate for me to ask whether the competition might come with a 60 cycle. Because did we move past the break, or we should take our break? Yes, please, we would like to take our break. Thank you very much. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Morning Connection. We certainly enjoyed our conversation with Winsome Callum, and I hope you did too. It is always good when you can hear, I was going to say from the horse's mouth.
She's not a horse,
But
she's a wonderful lady.
that is undoubtedly so. And is JPS a horse?
No, it's not.
Yes. But it's always good when you can hear directly from the company, and certainly Winsome is neither lacking in experience nor knowledge.
Should be very on time.
And yes, but she is the face of their communication. That's the public face of JPS, and a lot of the questions that would no doubt preoccupy us, I'm reading some of it on the chat, are more of a technical nature, and some of them strategy and financial nature. Naturally, if you are a monopoly provider, and she nailed it, she says just the very fact that our main supplier of electricity operates as a monopoly is distasteful to some of us, because the absence of choice has us feeling, like we're slaves again, because we can't pick and choose. That last point, Percival,
5061.
the 50-60 cycle, and the fact that
Legacy.
the grid is, how old is this service that we're enjoying? I mean, electricity was in Jamaica from the earliest times.
Before
So it's a
even some
very
countries
old,
and
yeah.
some places in the US and other places.
Precisely.
Yeah.
I mean, Her Majesty's colony was in good standing ahead of many places in the United States and other parts of the Commonwealth, because Jamaica was always a crown jewel.
The crown jewel in the thing.
Yeah, always.
Like we had motor cars before a lot of people.
Railway was here before yeah. So we've been kind of a trendsetter and first off the mark in a number of things. So you have to ask, and the company, the Jamaica Public Service, is 80% privately owned now.
Yeah, 20%.
20% still in government hands.
People are
So
saying they
it
should
has
sell it.
been the responsibility of our own governments over time to make the best arrangements for the provision of electricity in this country. Not just for, consumers, residential consumers, but because electricity is critical to the production sector, the tourism sector. The mining sector produce their own.
Yeah, that's
but
what, yeah.
but electricity is an important component of productivity. So why would we, when the country from which we get most of our appliances, why would we not have planned and orchestrated the changeover so that customers are carrying the cost now?
Yeah.
Do you remember the caller who said that someone's equipment had been damaged,
and
they were just at the point of
getting
writing the check
Yeah.
when they found out the 50-60 cycle crosses, and they said, oh well, not compliant with our system. So it has been a hardship for consumers who really, for a fact, you're going to buy your appliances from the market that is closest to you. And it just like how we discovered that when you buy a car in the US, if you buy a car in the US, market closest to you, that car is made for the drive on the right.
Yeah.
We still here with the British system of driving on the left, and so we have to get our left-hand made cars from markets that don't count us. So there are some prices that we have to endure in Jamaica for commonly sold commodities. There are some prices we have to endure because we are too small to have an impact on world production levels, and so nobody is gonna make any special thing for you at a modest cost. You just have to bear the cost of producing, of getting your goods, and all because, along with the Queen on our birth paper, we are still holding to some standards that came out of the colonial age, and the citizens are the ones who bear the cost of it. I am left-handed. I declare it. I wear it as a badge of honor. I'm left-handed, and I have to deal with things made for a right-handed world all the time. A pair of scissors, even the thing to cut a can. If you didn't know, common utensils that you use in the kitchen are curved in a direction for right-handed use.
Because
If I were to
you're
go,
anomaly in the system.
because I'm in the minority,
You're
right?
anomaly in the system.
I'm not a glitch in the matrix. Pastor's calling me a name. Gonna report it to the producer. Pastor called me a not so nice name. Yeah, but so I know what it is to need uniquely designed products that only 10 of you are going to buy it, and
So I
therefore
love
it
you so
costs $1
much.
million.
So the reason I love you so
Because
much.
I'm left-handed.
Yes.
Oh well, all right.
The opposites attract.
Opposites attract, says Pastor. Oh well, left and right. But the point I'm making is that in planning for our needs, it would not be unreasonable for governments over time to say, now listen, most of our citizens are getting appliances from this market. Those appliances are not compatible with this system. Let us over time migrate to
Talking from the 60s, you know, that's
yeah,
why
we could have paid for it by now.
Yeah.
And government,
That's why
as
foresight is so
government,
important.
yeah. Yes, as
Yes, sir.
government, we could have paid for it, but now that the company is in private hands, they can tell us, and rightly so, that the cost to do that kind of retrofitting or transformation
But
is,
you rightly said, you are
is-
not
but,
approve
yeah.
such a thing because we'd have to pay for it. They're not going to pay for it.
no, it's the customer who have to pay for
Yeah,
it.
all the
Yeah,
time. So
yeah.
even if
But the customer pay for it anyway. You know how much iron you throw away over all the years since you've been ironing clothes and buying iron on the 60 cycle, and it burn out in. It's one of the things that burn out very fast. Washing machine. I did not know this. The point she made, that over time it works well for the first, 1,000. But I know people who can have a washing machine for years. In Jamaica, your washing machine, especially these highly sensitive ones, and the list goes on. So you pay for it either way. You're gonna pay for it in the many appliances that get burnt out and mash up and throw away, or you're gonna pay for it in your bill, but only for a time, because after a while the equipment would have been paid out. But I'm sure some of their operating costs would go down. For example, they probably could get engineers and services and replacement gear at a cheaper cost and in less time, because they are not
closer to the US, yeah.
yeah, right, yeah.
But you let us raise the discussion you're making.
And
to
Taki agrees with me, by the way.
Yes, and he would, because
Yeah.
you're making a very excellent point.
Oh.
But again, it speaks to what is called vision and foresight. We can no longer continue to plan with an election in mind.
Say it again, Pastor.
We can no longer afford
Yeah.
as a people to plan with an election in mind. And as people in this country, we have to begin to say, no man, I am thinking now about my grandchildren. But now only I think about me and my children. I am putting up, preparing for my grandchildren. And that is why some societies continue to thrive and to move on, because they're not only thinking of the present, they are saying, we've sat down, we have looked at this, and we think this is the best thing for us to do that will serve us long term. And so it's a call out and a calling to our leaders on both sides, our leaders in industry, our leaders all over the place. Do you know, I said it tonight, everybody laugh after me. I said the amount of money that I'm spending to make a new corner, to renovate
Yes,
corner.
yes.
The project manager says
Build a new one.
it's better when they just build a green field, because the amount of money that we have expended, and I said it originally, I think somebody on the program had said it, the building was sick. When buildings are sick, you just condemn them and move on.
Well, Odd Pen building is now sick too. Office of Disaster Preparedness. They have a problem. They have mold in their building.
Yeah, and mold is not good for anybody, because you hear these stories and you follow it online that people are sick and them go to the doctor, they can't tell us, and the doctor said, "Hey, just check your building," and they
Yes.
discover that what has happened is that the building's sick, and the Corner Regional Hospital is a sick building, and as And you know that came out is the project manager said to them they were giving a tour the opposition. And he
Yes.
said to them, hello, might as well just build a green field because the amount of money expended, you could have gotten a brand new hospital.
And there should be no shame in calling it quits and starting on the right course, because sometimes, you know, and I feel that we're in that place with that hospital, sometimes we've gone so far, we've spent so much, we feel like we can't abandon course.
Too big
Listen,
to
man, no such thing. You can use it for whatever period you can while you're building the new one. And
When
stop
this
wasting money on it, borrowing
this
money that
program
people have to pay back.
It started under PMP and it was a blinker
Mm-hmm.
thing. And how much we are 2 election cycles, so the building would have been ready to go now.
So do you think that there is anyone in the high positions of leadership that has the courage to just make, you know what I'm going to call it? The manly courage. You know, I lived to see Michael Manley do that. Change course, apologize, and just start from the position that he now understands is the right position.
And he did it.
And he did it. He took the hit for it, but he did it.
He did it, he said.
Do you think we still have in our
Leaders like that
political
in our
landscape
present would-
that kind of boldness to admit that this is the wrong course we're on now, and now that I feel that this is so, I'm just gonna do the right thing and take my licks for it? Because we need that kind of courage. And I'm calling for us another thing now, Percival. I hope you'll join me with it.
Which is what? To remove all of yourself.
No, not that.
The self and the program.
But I see you would join me in that too. No, I'm just saying we've been talking about continuity and disaster mitigation. As a policy, I saw it being executed without fail in the special economic zone application process. Half of your application is covered with what they call business recovery,
Contingencies, yes.
mitigation, and disaster management, all to ensure continuity of what they say would be a critical business for the economy. Could we now make a call across our government? Can we call for persons to publish their disaster mitigation and continuity plan, business continuity plan?
You mean in government? You mean the statutory bodies?
All of them, yes. How are you going to ensure that services can continue? Most of them have had to create something during the pandemic. They had to sort of look at their business and say, okay, what are the things that can go on hibernation and what are the things that must continue if we are going to reopen our doors? Could we please put it on your website, whatever you need to do? Let Jamaicans have an understanding of what would happen in some critical services if there's a problem. The letter of the day says water crisis shows lack of foresight. Of course, before I even saw the letter of the day, we were talking about the fact that clearly NWC at the management level is not prepared to deal with an emergency lock-off situation. Then let's say them never knows a striker come, but you must have a plan in place that kicks into gear when something like that. So a citizen is writing about the fact that schools had to close down, everything had to grind to a halt because there is no plan in place, which means the Ministry of Education don't have the schools, the public schools certainly, resource to handle such a contingency.
Yes, they close and say, oh, them children were happy. And the children were happy. We get another free
any holidays
Any
a time for celebration. But you know, just and if you are on a PTA or you are a teacher or a principal or whatever,
what is your mitigation?
You should be looking at your organization and saying, now what if this happens? Whether it is that you have water storage and a pump, whatever the situation might be, because anytime you have to send home children early on a kind of emergency basis, it is a dislocation for the whole family. For the transportation system, everything has to sort of recalibrate to deal with it. And so it does make sense if at some level as a society we have this consciousness to be making those kinds of plans.
But that's important. I called somebody yesterday to do something. She said, I can't talk to you now because they just called me and tell me so I need to come pick up my daughter because they don't have no water and thing. Fine and good, she could drive and go and pick up. But for the majority of the people whose children are in school, it is a major headache. Because most times you leave home, I'm talking about educational system, you leave home, you and the child go out, and then in the middle of the day you drop the child at school, you get a call to say, or a text to say, we're locked in school now. You have to think now what you're going to be doing. So
and productive time is lost because every worker that have to go off and look after family, and no point you tell them, you cannot tell people to ignore their children and let someone else take care of it at a time of crisis. Absolutely impossible.
It doesn't work that way at all in terms of what needs to happen. So the call is for, can the major statutory organization, the government agency, show us what is their mitigation plan in the case of emergency? Well, hurricane is something that we live with. Earthquake, we have earthquake drills. But in case other things happen, how will you continue to function with your business in terms of what is happening? Yesterday we raised the point in terms of WHO and this treaty that the 22nd to the 25th that 194 member countries are going to sign to. But it has this meeting has been a year in the making because 25 world leaders and the Prime Minister of Trinidad was one of the persons who called for WHO to have this treaty. It was 25 leaders from around the world, and we are calling and asking again because it seems that the whole idea is to cede sovereignty to the WHO in a situation when there's another pandemic. And according to our very good friend Bill Gates, well, this pandemic finished, but another one.
He can safely predict another one.
He can say, and who is Bill Gates? I keep asking myself.
Well,
he owns Microsoft, but hello, what knowledge does he have?
Well, the most significant thing I can tell you about Bill Gates is that in a time to come, not necessarily very far off, someone like you will be presiding over his departure from this realm. He is human, he is fallible, he is finite, as you like to emphasize. Yes.
They're all accountable.
And no matter what wizardry man is going to come up with, if Bill Gates is going to live forever as a transhuman, he will have to do it in hiding. So that is and it's what I say about all human beings who get so inflated and so powerful in their own minds or otherwise that they begin to take on, godlike assignments. I say one day you will die. I really did like Hugo Chavez, one of my favorite leaders of this time. But the day he said, I want to be president for life, was the day he signed his own death sentence. He did die as president for life because he died in office.
But you want to be president for life?
President for life. No more opposition. And he died in office. So it is for everyone else. Time to take the break? Yes, Mr. Producer. We'll go on break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Take the last half an hour.
Welcome back. We are in the final stretch of today's program. Thank you for staying with us. And for this last segment, I just want to share with you some of the history, details of our history with electricity. As Pastor Percival said, Jamaica was amongst the first to receive electricity. In fact, on the JPS website, you'll get some information. Listen, we're experiencing high winds at the Ligani Club and the choppy seas. We're in like a wind tunnel that goes right onto the sea. When you're at the club, it's almost impossible to have a hot day.
Yeah,
There's
because
always a breeze running through the Ligani Plains right down to the sea, and we're right in the middle of it. So if you hear some noise in the background, it's like gale force winds, and where we are, a lot of palms and foliage. So
she might be
you will hear it.
rolling at the moment, but we do not have
Not gale force winds.
not gale force wind.
Who's gale? All right. So yeah, through the years, JPS has a timeline that they have there. Let's see. Electricity came to Jamaica in 1892. It's 130 years ago. 13 years after Thomas Edison invented the first successful electric lamp. And then from 1892, there is a map of the pathway down to the present, which tells you too that there once was competition in the generation and distribution of electricity. The first company, the Electric Light and Power Company, which included a distribution to private residents from 1893, and then another company emerged in 1897. The West India Electric Company emerged, and then in 1907 there was the Great Earthquake, and that led to a consolidation of both businesses. One was set up to provide service in the Kingston area, started downtown on Gold Street, if I remember it. Then it expanded to Orange Street, while the West India Electric Company was in St. Catherine. They started in Rio Cobre. Yes, that was a hydroelectric. Right.
And if you drive along that road, that is the River Road we call it.
Yeah,
you can see the remnants of the
right.
plant.
Yeah. And then then things started to pick up in the 1920s to 1945, and then in coming all the way down into the 60s when the government, along the way, the government acquired ownership of this business, and then they did a significant divestment. What year did that happen? 1996, 97. And so here we are today. Now, of course, this is on JPS website, so it doesn't give you the journey of the technology and how various decisions are made. But there are a couple of things that you and I can share based on our own knowledge. You had worked in sugarware. I'm sure they had to look at energy conservation and renewables.
And one of the things that was looked at heavily was using the bagasse to do generating. And some people had started to use it, but it would have to be a significant amount of bagasse generated that would help to drive the electricity of the
for the plant that they operated.
And some companies did, and so they were able to conserve. But yeah.
So what has happened to us now, and we have to be very sensitive to this issue. There are some resources and some services that are of national import, and the reason we have government agencies overseeing some of these areas is because we know they are too important for them to be left solely in private hands, where private sector money that moves just against the prospect of generating capital and return on investment makes decisions in areas that have social and a wider economic impact. Those are the things we call essential services: water, health, electricity, transportation, education. Those are areas that are so important that we cannot afford for the private sector to dominate in the decision making. Yet we see in the area of electricity, energy, we see that it has been left primarily in private sector hands with regulatory oversight that stops short of making adequate planning for the needs of the people, for the nation. So, for example, JPS will tell you, and rightly so, that the cost to change out equipment is so great that if they were to pass it on to the customers, it would never happen.
Would never
So
fly.
that means it will never happen.
Never fly.
Now, unless at the planning and policy level, our government
Besides,
take a decision.
I say, you know what?
Yes.
This long term will benefit everybody. Let's do it.
Let's find a way to do it.
Yeah.
Just like how they put all kinds of things on the bill to make provision for various things. Make provision for something that will be of benefit to us long term.
But one of the things I believe, Minette, that pushes back against that in the past, like with NHD, a lot of people still
Yes.
are very
And I left that one out. Housing.
yeah, a lot of people are very, very
Bitter.
bitter and upset in NHD and what has happened in regards to it, because okay, these agencies are set up to move a lot of the people forward, being the majority of Jamaica, but yet you every month in or every fortnight you see this money taken out of your salary, like for NHD. You ask and they said, we can do better, we can get one little
Yeah.
house. I interact with a lot of people. I remember this lady, she's a security guard, and she said the greatest thing is to have a house. And I say, you don't see them building it. She said, me try, but we can't get it because I don't qualify based on my thing. But I earn, although the government continues to make provision for that, but it needs to be more widespread, and with all of the lands that we have, instead of putting it in the hands of private and say build these houses, NHD in partnership should say, we give you the land, can we do this together long term? Because we have the expertise to get it done, but the question is, do we have the will to get it done, in terms of saying this is what we really want to see happen. If you're driving on the highway 2000, you see Bernard Lodge, where Bernard Lodge is, some new houses.
Is it the tiny things that
Yes, those are houses.
my niece asked me what are they?
Yes, it's
And I
that's
was
what-
hard put. You know what it reminded me of? And it's something that I hope to one day see take place in Jamaica. On traveling on the train through Europe and going through, I've forgotten which country, and looking through it, and I saw all these tiny, beautiful, colorful little houses. And it was in the, Lord of the Rings was still close in mind. And I'm like, are hobbits real? It's like hobbit
though.
houses. I was being facetious, but I learned, because of course I inquired about these tiny, pretty houses out in the wilderness. I learned that true to the Old Testament formula of cities being surrounded by farming villages that support and feed the people in the city, that you can have your house, your apartment in the city, and have a little piece of land out in the country where you go and farm. And so the people they were like sheds, the little farming sheds for your tools and so on. But they were the cutest little things, and everybody had them decorated and so on. Those houses that I see, the ones you're talking about, are smaller
Are you kidding?
than the people's little farming sheds that I saw dotting the countryside as you travel by train through Europe.
And I'm saying,
And they're far less attractive.
I know,
because
but you just have matchbox. That's
it's
what it
that,
is.
I tell you, man.
And I'm saying, so the idea is to build it so people can add on. But I'm looking at it and say, good God, man, if this is what it's been going on, and I've been observing some are finished, because let me tell you how if you drive the back road, we call it, which is you come out of Portmore and you drive by the Tamarind Farm Correctional Center. That is where the access point is to those houses, and they're so small. They are so small. And
They are a harsh. They're a harsh indictment against our planners and our housing department. I'm going to call it that, because it is telling you that they have the expectation that adult Jamaicans will inhabit those houses and start families. And I mean, when I saw Portmore houses, I was in shock. I'm a country girl, so I really am accustomed to
But we're
people.
getting smaller and smaller.
And Portmore houses were palaces compared to those
those
little units.
Minute,
You
we're-
tell me, say a man and woman can live in that, have a baby, and maybe have 2 children, and they have
Minute.
any kind of
Minute.
dignity in
Minute.
that setting.
If I am not mistaken, where we are sitting now,
It's bigger, of course it's
much
bigger.
bigger.
Yeah, of course it is.
And this is what we've entered into agreement to build these houses.
And some parish council approve it, and
on,
some NEPA individual approve it, and some social assessment was made of as to the amenities of this space, and it was approved, and it's being built, and
somebody's
that's what
going
we're
to say,
telling.
oh, we build so many thousands of houses. But come on.
I saw Lowell build a kennel for a Great Dane that is comparable. The Great Dane is a tall dog,
I know, but
and
no,
so he needed space, and I see Lowell build that.
hello. So
Yes, and he's telling me now a workshop he built for our son one Christmas is about that size.
but minute.
Well, not true. That
minute,
workshop, the
minute.
workshop would be like the bedroom, one room.
Minute. No.
Yes.
Because I'm looking at it and I've been taking pictures on my phone, the other phone. Paths I just stopped coming in on highway just take as it was emerging. Now a lot of them are finished. I'm going,
What is that really saying?
who are gonna live in a
Yeah.
who are we constructing these houses for? Are you saying to me that our policymakers, we know there's a housing shortage and we know we need to build building houses, but do we take into consideration that families, this is what we think of our people now.
That's the part that gets me, that's a statement we're making about what we think our people deserve, and then we call them squatters, and we all right,
No,
Pastor, let's wrap up, because you and I are going to end up crying on this program if we continue this line of conversation.
No man, no, for real man, no sir.
All right, Pastor has been rendered speechless. Let me say thank you to those who have been online and on air, bearing with us on Thursday. I know Thursday is a painful moment for some of our listeners, but it continues to be important to us that Percy and I sit outdoors and just kind of vary how we do the show. We are still working on how to make sure that some elements of it are as pleasing to you as they are to us. So please have a wonderful weekend. Thanks to the crew back in the studio, and to those who are bearing with us on location. Thanks to the Ligani Club and to JD's Urban Pub. And as always, thank you, Pastor. I know some things touch your heart this morning, which means that you're going to go into deeper prayer and intercession, and for that I am grateful.
No man, serious. When you think about it,